So, I love video games, but I have this problem. If I start playing a game and get bored within the first hour, I'm extremely unlikely to finish or possibly ever play again even, and it often just sits on my hard drive for years until I eventually go back to play, which never happens. I must have dozens, if not hundreds of games that will never be finished. But this has prompted a genius idea and premise for a new series, the 1 hour review. Just like the name sounds, I'll be picking a game that I've never played before and playing it for 1 hour. I'll then review the game based on the first hour, pointing out a few of my idiosyncrasies, or even things that it does really well. Whether or not I like it, or will continue it, well, that's yet to be determined. Today's game will be DyingLight 2. DyingLight 2 is the sequel to Techland's 2015 survival horror game entitled Dying Light, and its DLC known as The Following. Dying Light 2, though it is a sequel, does not follow the protagonist from the original game. It is set in a completely different location with a completely different protagonist. Dying Light was one of the zombie games that I played back when zombie games were incredibly popular that I really liked, actually. I enjoyed the parkour and story much more than a traditional hack and slash zombie game such as Left 4 Dead or even Dead Rising, but it returns with a sequel 7 years later in 2022. Overall okay reviews, a 7 to 8 out of 10, as opposed to Dying Light's, I think it was a 9 out of 10. The first hour of game is a bit rough, I would say. Like I said, it's a return to zombie craze. Now, I've had probably a grand total of 30 to 40 minutes practice with the parkour and combat, and I will say it's much smoother in this game than I remember it being on the original. But there are still a few little hiccups that I've noticed. The main one being the zipline mechanic just doesn't feel great. It feels like there's lacking tactile feedback or an indicator really that you successfully grabbed onto and are ziplining, which you can see in this clip. And I remember it being an issue in the first one too that you kind of just get used to, but I'm a little disappointed that they didn't fix it in this game. Dying Light 2 isn't an exact copy of the first, however. Unlike the original game, this game has introduced dialogue options. It's unsure how much these will come into effect as of right now, because the couple I have had options with basically have one path highlighted and you don't have a choice but to pick that one. But given that I'm in the quote-unquote tutorial, that makes sense to me. But hopefully there are in the future dialogue options that will have consequences and maybe branch the story a little bit. The game looks very good, I would say. Although most of the tutorial and start of the game is located in dense forest, mountains, or dark tunnels, and at night, there's a few standalone shots that really do tell you when you eventually get to the city, which I was just barely able to get to in the first hour of gameplay, is going to look very good in the day, as you can see with a couple of these shots. I'm playing on high and very high settings. The only settings that I have set on low for the purposes of saving resources, because I don't personally notice them very much in games, are reflections and shadows. However, I have turned ray tracing on for sun and flashlight in the game, which definitely does affect the performance, because when I went from outside in the sun to underground in the tunnels, I saw an increase of frames of around 15 to 20 on average, but that's very common with ray tracing. So overall, I'd say a very good looking game. I did encounter two minor visual and audio issues with the game so far. One being at about 45 minutes into the game for me, there, as you can see and hear, for some reason in this cutscene, the corpse, I don't know if it just happens to be where I killed this soldier, but it's freaking out and making the cutscene basically unwatchable. It's so annoying. And then the second one right here, the character models just haven't quite loaded in. They're just standing still until eventually the game realizes it and they're supposed to be doing an animation and they begin moving. However, I wouldn't really consider these too much of an issue. I mean, it happens sometimes. But the main issue that I have had with this game that really is making me struggle to give it a good rating is the tutorial is very long. And I say tutorial because it's not a lot of tutorial, really. Sure, it's teaching you some things. It's teaching you the combat, it's teaching you the parkour, but there's huge 20-minute, 10-minute gaps where it doesn't teach you anything new. But the main reason I have an issue with it is because this is a quote-unquote co-op enabled game. I originally bought this game with the intention to play with my friends, and I load up thinking, there's going to be a half-hour, 45-minute tutorial, much like the original. It had a half an hour to 45-minute tutorial, depending on how fast you sped through it. And so I just keep playing, and I get 45 minutes in, and I pause for a minute to look up how long the tutorial is, because I'm still going, and I read that it's estimated to take between 2.5 and 3 hours to complete the tutorial and enable multiplayer, which is absolutely ridiculous to me. There is absolutely no reason to continue on past, I would say, the city. You should just be enabled multiplayer from there. Like, the first game, basically, if you're playing multiplayer for any of the story and cutscenes, it pretends that you're by yourself and the other character model disappears for all cutscenes and cinematics, which I'm assuming is what this game's gonna do. I obviously haven't tested this yet, but it seems like they wouldn't abandon that system. So why can't you just teach you everything you need to do in this half an hour to 45 minutes, or cut some of the earlier content that really doesn't matter? First, I'd say half hour could be condensed into 10 minutes. It just teaches you the parkour and sets up that you need to find this guy because you're looking for your sister. You could have easily trimmed down this 25-30 minute campaign to 5 to 10 minutes and just had him go straight to the tunnel and just skip all of this. I understand that they're probably trying to maybe pad the length of the game a little. I don't know how long it's estimated to take, and if I wasn't intending to play co-op, this wouldn't be an issue at all for me, but a lot of people bought this game to play co-op, and I simply don't think a 3-hour tutorial is needed. Like I said, there's gaps of 20 to 30 minutes where it's just not quote-unquote teaching you anything. You can learn all the combat in the tunnels, you can learn all the parkour getting to the tunnel or getting to the city. It could just prompt you on a screen like so many other tutorials. And then you'll just learn about the world when you get to the city. I don't understand. The other main issue that I have with the game that I would consider is just annoying, especially to me personally, but I understand that some people might not agree with it, is there's 2 instances in the game where basically you're just forced to take extra time for no reason. When you're transforming or beginning to transform from being bitten, which I understand for the storytelling that they want to convey that you've been bitten and that you're turning, but they do it twice before you reach the city and meet Hakan. They then tell you in the city, and it continues to show you that you're bitten and trying to turn. So if you haven't figured it out already, they're going to tell you anyway, so why are they wasting time making you basically stand there and watch the screen for a minute to 2 minutes while it does the animation? I just personally think it's stupid. And then the other one is when you and Hakan are running through the city to get to his friend to get a biotracker, which, as a side note, I don't understand why you need. I don't know why you can't just take one from a corpse or take one from a zombie and put it on, unless maybe you can't. Maybe it never goes green again after you turn, but that seems really stupid. But nonetheless, maybe that gets explained in the next 5 minutes that I haven't played yet. But I just needed to throw that out there, that I don't understand why they didn't do that. But you get to this wall and Hakan scales it and you can't. And it makes you try, and it basically slows down your gameplay by 2 to 5 minutes, which may not seem a lot, but we're up to adding an extra 8 to 10 minutes to the tutorial because of these stunts for absolutely no reason. It's not teaching you, a new mechanic. It's not teaching you anything in a tutorial. It's just making you wait. It's dragging out the tutorial, which is not something that I'm okay with, especially in a game with a 3-hour tutorial. You have no reason to drag it out that long. But overall, my 2 main complaints with the game are a few minor visual bugs and the long tutorial, which overall, like I said, a lot of people won't find a problem if they don't want to play co-op. I just happen to want to play co-op, and it's a huge selling point to the game. So it seems foolish to me that they would say, no, you can't do co-op for the first 3 hours of the game. But nonetheless, like I said, I think it's a beautiful game. The controls and the parkour is much more polished than the original. It feels a lot better. I'm very excited, and I do fully plan to continue this game despite the little idiosyncrasies I have with it so far. Out of a 10, the first hour of DyingLight2 gets a solid 6.5, and I will definitely be continuing to play.